Earlier we learned how badly Lewis was hit by the First World War, but the biggest single loss of life would actually come after the conflict had ended. The sinking of the Iolaire on New Year's Day 1919 remains Britain's worst peacetime disaster at sea since the Titanic. Those who died were in touching distance of home. The men were returning to Lewis after 4 years away fighting in World War I, and what made it even more awful was that some of their families were waiting right here in the harbour pier for their men to return, unaware of the disaster that was unfolding less than a mile away. Earlier, the Iolaire had set sail from the Scottish mainland. The men on board had survived the horrors of war and were eager to be reunited with their loved ones. But as the ship entered Stornoway Bay, disaster struck. Local author John MacLeod has written an account of the tragedy.
So this is where the Iolaire disaster happened, when the vessel ran aground. She came around the corner of the bay late at night, pitch black, far too close to the shore, and with inexperienced officers in charge who never sailed her at night.
The ship struck a notorious reef, the Beasts of Holme, which lie below this marker.
And suddenly, with a tremendous bang, she skewered over to the side. Dozens of youths on board on the open decks just washed away, left fighting for their lives in the sea. Soaked to the skin, chilled, terrified.
Most who tried to make it ashore were immediately lost. But one man held his nerve. John Finlay MacLeod plunged into the ferocious waters with a line and used the momentum of the waves to reach dry land.
There's only one chance, and just keep yourself afloat. And watch out for the waves. And don't take the first one. The second, but watch the third one. But it's always the highest.
Once ashore, John and others brought dozens to safety. But the remorseless sea would claim 205 lives, with only 80 survivors. Anne Macaulay's great-grandfather was one of those who drowned. She remembers how deeply her grandmother Mary was affected.
My granny was 10 when her father died. She was the only one of the 5 children in her family who properly knew what it was like to have their father at home, and therefore she was the one who most keenly felt his loss. There were so many losses. I would say it probably ripped the heart out of the island. People just closed the door on it, because I think talking about it would have just been too painful. The church was very strong in the island, and I would say that the faith of the people up here at that time is what got them through.
Between the two world wars, the Isle of Lewis saw hundreds of islanders move away to build new lives. In our next story, we hear about people who've left their homes to come to the UK. 3 years ago, St Mark's Church in Stoke got a new vicar, the Reverend Sally Smith.
It was typical really of a church in a post-industrial city, just a handful in the congregation on a Sunday morning of mainly white people.
But that soon changed. A growing number of asylum seekers were arriving in Stoke, and Sally couldn't turn her back on the new influx of people to her area.
We opened the door to welcome people in to a drop-in where people could come and have a cup of tea, a piece of toast.
Where are you going now? No, I go home.
Home. Some of those have responded to the kindness that they've encountered, and they've wanted to learn more about Jesus, so they've started to come along and worship with us and become part of the life of the church. And so we have regular baptisms now. Receive the sign of his cross. And we've done around 60 baptisms this year, and probably 50 of those are from a Muslim background. Amen. One of the questions I often get asked is, aren't they just doing this to get their papers? And I, as a follower of Jesus and as a minister, as a priest, I have to say, what would I want for this person in front of me? How would Jesus respond to this person in front of me now?
Riches of his grace.
Zahir already has a visa to stay in the UK, but he still chose to be baptised.
I was very happy. I can't describe my feelings. I'm going to change to a new version of me.
With a growing congregation of asylum seekers, Sally saw a new need, and the solution was on her doorstep.
There was a house across the road from the church, which I brought. I had some money in the bank, which wasn't earning any interest. We were able to buy that house and do it up with the help of volunteers who come along to the drop-in, who have many, many skills. Now it provides accommodation for people who are completely destitute. I get contacted by churches around the country who've seen things about us in the media and have said exactly the same things happening here in our church, not just Anglican churches.
Nice.
There is something happening around not only this country but around Europe, a spiritual awakening.
Jalal was a TV engineer in Iran. He says that installing systems into people's houses which allowed them to tune into foreign news made him a target for the regime.
Everything has changed in our lives now. Our lives are full of joy, hope, love, kindness, peace. Life used to be based on fear, but now it's totally changed.
There's a prophecy in the book of Isaiah that talks about the wealth of the nations coming to us and about foreigners rebuilding our cities and building up our walls that have been broken down. And I believe that asylum seekers and refugees are the wealth of the nation. And not everyone will see that, but we need to be able to see through the eyes of the prophet, and we need to see the gifts and the skills and the abilities and the treasure that's coming to us and to welcome them. They've brought new life to my church, and I wouldn't change one moment of what's happened over the last couple of years.
All of heaven calls your name, sing louder. Let this place erupt with praise. Can you hear it? The sound of heaven touching earth. Let's sing together again, our Father. Our Father. All of heaven calls your name, sing louder. Let this place erupt with praise. Can you hear it? The sound of heaven touching earth. Sound of heaven. The sound of heaven touching. Spirit break out. Spirit break out. Break our walls down. Break our walls down. Spirit break out. Spirit break out. Heaven come